If you're a Christian couple who love each other, but lately it just feels like you're just not as safe with each other as you used to be, then this video is for you. Maybe you're just more guarded with your words. Maybe little conflicts are sticking a little longer than they should. Maybe you've started avoiding real conversations because they never seem to go well anymore. Hi, I'm Debbie Caudle. Welcome to my channel, Marriage in Bloom. I am a Christian therapist and relationship coach, and I help couples just like you move from a place of disconnection and emotional reactivity, walking on eggshells, to a place of emotional safety and deeper connection, and a marriage that actually feels like we're partners again. We're pulling in the same direction. Inside my 6-month transformative program, Marriage in Bloom, I walk couples through practical, faith-based tools to heal patterns and build a new way of relating. And in today's video, I'm going to share a simple 3-part framework for how to restore emotional safety. This is for Christian marriages, but it's the same model that I use with all my clients. And my goal is that by the end of this video, you're going to be able to see exactly where things are breaking down in your marriage and what you can do differently right now, today, this week. So if you've been feeling that emotional distance from your spouse and you've been thinking, we love God and we love each other, so why does our marriage feel so tense? Then stick with me. Let's walk through this framework together. And let's jump into the presentation where I'm going to show you on screen the 3 parts of this framework. So emotional safety is where you can bring your inner thoughts, how you really think and feel, to your spouse without any kind of fear of them getting defensive, attacking you, dismissing you, minimizing what you're saying, or any sort of like silent treatment or punishment, right? When you can do that without any of those things happening, then you feel safe in your marriage. But if you don't feel that way, it's okay. You're not alone. This is very, very normal. Even in Christian marriages, many people struggle with emotional distance and emotional reactivity and mistrust that has been built up over years. So I'm going to walk you through a simple 3-part framework so that you can immediately start changing this. All right, let's dive in and let's talk about that. Okay, so when you don't feel safe in your marriage, you have that walking on eggshells sort of feeling, like I have to be careful, I have to tiptoe around, because if I step on this topic, bad things happen, right? So my partner gets really defensive, or they get really angry, they explode on me, and vice versa. And so it's just easier to not talk about it at all. Let's just stuff those emotions. Maybe they've had a hard day and I don't want to make it worse, but I can feel it building up inside of me, and it's going to come out at some point. And it's going to come out probably in a way that's going to damage that level of safety and trust even more, right? And there are a lot of common problems that are common causes that bring about a lack of safety. So busy schedules and all of those unresolved hurts that have happened over years, all those little things that chipped away at your trust of each other, that layered up and built that wall, okay? And harsh communication that develops as a result. We're not being kind and thoughtful to each other anymore with our words. And so we're more reactive, we're more explosive, we get our feelings hurt very, very quickly, we assume the worst. And the longer we've been married, the less curious we are about why our partner says and does what they do. We just assume that we know because we're basing it on past experience. And so then we also see, the result of that is we're living under the same roof, but we're just not connecting. This is a really lonely relationship to be in. I can't open up. I unburden myself, I can't tell you how I'm really, really feeling. And we even end up having, spiritual drift, right? So, and I know that God designed marriage as a place of refuge and safety, not fear or constant, tension. But when you don't have emotional safety, you don't have that refuge. Home isn't a haven. The marriage isn't a place of safety. All right. But I want you to know that if that's what's going on in your marriage, it can change. We can totally turn this around. So let's talk about how to do that. Okay. So the 3-part framework starts with awareness. Awareness is, first of all, the acknowledgement within you of what's really going on. What am I really feeling? We'll talk more about this in a second. Sometimes it's hard to be honest about, we can say I'm angry or I'm annoyed or I'm frustrated, but underneath that, what am I really feeling and why? And when you're open and honest with yourself and God, then you can start to really be honest with your spouse. Attunement. How do I communicate this, what I've come to really see and understand, in a way that my spouse feels safe, feels, like I get them, they get me, and we can talk about this without there being any more damage happening to each other's hearts. And finally, assurance. Not just my words, but my actions are communicating that, hey, each time we talk about something really difficult, it's okay. I'm not going to feel, like I'm in trouble anymore, or feel like a failure, or feel like I'm not understood at all. So let's walk through each one of these steps in detail and give you some examples of these. All right. First part is awareness. So what we want to do here is we want to understand how you typically react, how you typically show up. Okay, most couples only argue about surface stuff. They don't really get to the deeper emotions. So on the surface, again, you feel annoyed, you feel frustrated, you feel angry, and so that's what your partner sees. But underneath that are deeper emotions. This is where your fear lives, your shame, your feelings of being unimportant or disrespected, ignored, right? So for example, when you fight about the dishes, you're not really fighting about the dishes, are you? You're fighting about being disrespected, or being ignored, or feeling criticized, or feeling like nothing you ever do is good enough. So part of that awareness is what's really going on inside of you, okay? And part of your pattern might be that you might say things like, you always leave your dishes in the sink. You never put them in the dishwasher, okay? Well, as you become aware of what's really going on inside of you, instead of saying you always, you might say to yourself first and then to your spouse, I notice that when this happens, here's what I'm really feeling inside. And here's what I actually really do. Okay. And, I tend to shut down, or I tend to yell when I feel scared or anxious or hurt or ignored. Like that's what's really going on inside of me. Okay. And so how do I communicate that right now in a way that's not making my spouse feel safe? You got to be able to own that. You got to be able to see it. Okay. So one thing that I want you to try this week. All right. And let's look at a scripture first, because I love this scripture. I think this is really, really key. You can't just hold these things inside because you're afraid to say them to your spouse. Again, walking on tiptoe. You've got to be able to say it out loud, but you've got to acknowledge it first to yourself. But the way you say it is really, really critical. So I want you this week to just, with each other, try this one simple step. One feeling I've had a lot this week is, and then finish that sentence. and take turns answering that question with each other. Okay, let's go to part 2. Part 2 is attunement. Okay, so attunement is when your spouse feels, oh, you get me. You're with me in this. You understand where I'm coming from. You may not always agree with me, but I know that you really are listening to me. Now, there are some things that absolutely destroy emotional safety right from the get-go. And a lot of these can be nonverbal. So if you roll your eyes, or you're like, right? Or you spiritualize the problem and go, if you just had more faith, you need to go talk to God about that. We wouldn't be having these problems if you would just pray more. Okay? Or you get sarcastic, or you get defensive, or you minimize the problem. Like, well, that's stupid. That's dumb. Why are you feeling that way? Just stop feeling that way. That's going to destroy emotional safety faster than anything, right? Instead, what I want you to do is I want you to replace those things with curiosity. And curiosity just simply looks like, help me understand what that felt like for you. Help me understand what's really going on. And once I understand, then I validate that. Like, okay, I get why you would feel that way. That makes sense. I see it differently. I have a different perspective. But now that you shared where you're coming from, I can see why you've been so upset or so frustrated. And remember, your tone and your body language need to be aligned with your words, okay? You can say all the right things, but your body language, if your posture is closed off, your arms are crossed, you're turned away, you're not making good eye contact, your hands are on your hips. There's so many different ways that your body can be communicating something very, very different than your words. You really, really need to pay attention to that. All right, let's go to part 3. But before we do that, let's look at James 1. Again, be quick to hear, slow to speak. That's just biblical validation for what we're talking about here, right? Listen first. Listening is so critical. Before you jump in and give your response, before you, rush in to say, well, here's why I did what I did, and here's my perspective. Listen. All right, part 3 is assurance. Okay, so emotional safety grows in the marriage when both of you see patterns of reliability from each other. Again, your words and your actions line up. So that means following through on things that you say you're going to do. If you recognize that you've screwed up in any kind of way, own it right there in the moment. You know what? That came out wrong. Let me try again. I am really sorry that I said that. I didn't mean to say that. That was hurtful. That was damaging. Let me try again. Or you know what? I just got a little heated, or I blew up. I can see how that hurt you. In the moment, making that repair is so critical. And then agreeing on some kind of boundaries with each other on how you're going to handle conflict in the future. So you might agree, we're never going to tell each other to shut up, or we are never going to call each other names. That's off limits. Or here's a big one that I highly recommend. Never, ever are we going to threaten divorce just because we are frustrated or we feel like we've tried everything else. And so now we're throwing out the divorce word. Like, that is off the table. That would be a boundary that you put when you are having difficult conversations, when you're fighting. Like, we're never going there. Okay. Taking a break when things get heated, agreeing beforehand, before you get to the place of conflict. Hey, you know what? If one of us feels like we're spiraling, we're getting flooded, emotional overload, overwhelmed, it's okay for that person to say, I'm feeling this certain way. Can we just take a 30-second break or a 5-minute break? Whatever you need. But we're coming right back to this. This is an important conversation. We're not going to leave this open-ended. I just need to step away, take some deep breaths, and then we can come right back to that. Okay? You always want to repair the moment you recognize that there's been a crack in the marital foundation, the moment you realize, I mean, it might be in the moment, it might be an hour later, like, oh, you know what, I screwed up and I said that. It's not too late in that moment to go back and say, you know what, can we talk about that? Because I think that came out wrong and I think I hurt your feelings and I didn't mean to do that. Always when you see the damage, either way, if your feelings were the ones that were hurt, go back and say, hey, we need to talk about this. All right? Remember, God's character is steady and trustworthy. And as you grow in your relationship with God, you become a safer person for your spouse. So your emotional safety from a spiritual perspective, your relationship with God should not be contingent on what your spouse is doing with God. That's your responsibility. You build that relationship with God, and that allows you to show up in the relationship as a safer person for your spouse to actually be around. Okay? I love this scripture, Matthew 5, let your yes be yes. This takes us back to step one, doesn't it? Awareness. Like, I need to make sure that what I'm saying is actually aligned with what's really going on inside of me, and that my behaviors and my words are aligned so that my partner has the assurance that difficult topics are safe to be discussed. Okay, let's put it all together. So we had this old pattern, right? Where something happened, you were triggered, you reacted in a certain way, and whatever that was. Did you blow up? Did you shut down? You know what you typically do. Let me give you an example. Let's say that your spouse came home late and forgot to text you. So in the past, what would you have normally done? Well, in this new pattern where you're building more emotional safety, the trigger's still there. They still forgot to text, but now you have the awareness of, you know what? I'm not just mad. Yeah, I'm mad or I'm frustrated, but really underneath that, I felt disrespected or I felt not very valued. And I also felt a little anxious because I was worried that something bad might have happened. That's what's really going on inside of me. Okay. And then the attunement, this is where your spouse listens to you and reflects back what you're saying. Okay, here's what I hear you saying. And then gives the assurance, okay, of, you know what, you're right. From now on, I'm going to text you if I'm running late, and then follows through on doing that. Small moments like this, repeated over and over, this is what builds emotional safety. Okay, so if you feel like you are too far gone, if you feel like, you know, this is just too simple for us, we've been having so many serious problems in our marriage. First of all, emotional safety is not built overnight. It just doesn't work that way. It is rebuilt daily, doing the right things day in and day out. I want you to imagine for a moment what it would feel like if you had emotional safety in your marriage that was growing day by day, week by week, month by month. Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, that's exactly what I do in my Marriage in Bloom program. It's a 6-month transformative intensive. And in that program, we are implementing all kinds of tools and guided conversations and exercises that give you the direction and the support and the tools for how to build emotional safety, as well as many other aspects that are missing in your marriage right now. If you're interested in that, please just click on the link. This is a free call, a free marriage assessment where I spend 45 to 60 minutes with you talking about what's actually going on in your marriage. And, you know, how you got there and what your next steps are. And there is absolutely no pressure. It's just a conversation. So if you're interested in that, click on the link. And if the link doesn't work, just go to my website, debbiecaudle.com/marriageinbloom, and that will give you a link to the free assessment as well. Thanks for joining me today.